Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. And hi to the people here in person and online. I think that this is a good opportunity for me to present myself, introduce myself to this new group of research and of people. Since I've been starting working here at INET from just 3-4 months. I am Michele, I come from Italy, and I'm part of the EEG program. Previously I was working in Rome, and also I have also collaborated with the Ministry of Economics and Finance of Italy. And that's why today I decided to present you some work in progress that is part of my previous research work that has been made with some colleagues, Stefano and Simone, with which I was working at the Ministry of Economics and Finance. I think that, as I said, these are work in progress. So please, all comments are very welcome, and feel free to interrupt, as Susan said just a few seconds ago. I thought that this was a good opportunity for me to share with you this piece of work, because this paper is about two things, basically: a model and inequality. And these two topics, I think that they are covered. They are covered by the INET research groups. There are two groups, with one that works on complexity, and especially with the agent-based models, and the group that I'm in that works basically on inequality. So that is why I got this opportunity to present this work here to you. So I start with the outline, of course, of the presentation. It's pretty straightforward. I will start with the motivation of our work. Then I will present the microsimulation model. I will get to the wealth data that we use in the model as a baseline. Then I will provide a specific description of the wealth module in the microsimulation model. And finally, I will talk about the simulation results, in particular with respect to the role of intergenerational transfers that are the focus of the talk today. So we start from this very general stylized facts. I call them as this. Basically, there are three of them. The first is the increasing role of wealth in our economies, in our societies, if you want. I inserted here 2 points on this, very general, that probably you know about that. Wealth to income ratios are rising all over the world, and Italy is, it's not an exception. Meaning that probably is rising even more with respect to averages. Also, there is an issue in terms of how this growing role of wealth is affecting the distribution, so the wealth inequality. And then the second point is what Atkinson defined as the return of inheritances. Why? Because in the last few decades, there has been an increase in the weight of inheritance over national incomes in major countries. And then there is the great issue, the great demographic issue related to the secular trend in population decrease and aging. And finally, there is the issue of the fact that the intergenerational intergenerational transfer tax burden with respect to the total taxes is very low. Sorry if you can't see here, probably, but I don't know how to fix this. I mean, here are some very I will go rush over some figures related to these salaries facts. I was mentioning the return of inheritances. These are from Atkinson, from UK and France. You see that in the last decades there is an increase again of the relationship between inheritances and national income. This is the same graph, but for Italy. And you see this is the black line is the again this ratio, while the blue line is the weight of tax revenue from inheritances over total tax revenue. The percentages are very, very low, as we will see later. This is a figure from the IWG report that predict the trends in population growth or degrowth in Europe, and here we can see that the population pyramid probably we cannot call like a pyramid anymore in the future, since it's becoming more like a rectangular or inverted pyramid. These are the projections for 2070. So the aging is going to be significant. So the fact that the population is going to age probably is becoming a fact, a stylized fact itself, even though it's something that we are expecting for the future. Economic growth, population growth. You mean for instance, in some other countries like the UK, there is an expectation of growth in population, but mainly this comes from migration. Instead, in terms of population in Europe, overall, the expectation is to degrowth. I mean, like very small percentages, and of course it depends on countries. Italy, on this respect, is the predictions are very, very negative, as we will see later. But instead, I want to underline that for UK, the predictions in terms of population are on the opposite side, but on the aging side are the same. Also in UK, there's going to be an aging process in the next decades. And on the inheritance tax, I wanted to show you, I don't know if you can see properly, but these are the share of inheritance taxes over total taxation in some countries, major countries, and all these shares are very, very low. The maximum is 2%. I guess this is UK. So UK is the country where there is. Sorry, France. Yeah, sorry. I cannot recognize the color, sorry, but I mean the message is that the share are very, very low, and also an interesting point is this one. Sorry that you cannot see that. I mean the y-axis, but these are the wealth to income ratio in UK, for instance, and also in the United States, it is growing, and the share of inheritance taxes over total taxation that has been decreasing over. These are long-term figures. So I mean, of course, we are not suggesting that there is a kind of a correlation or causality between these two phenomena direct, but still it's interesting that there is a kind of cross between these two lines. So all this introduction to say that we think that there is a kind of relationship between the demography, the accumulation process of wealth, and also there is a missing part that I didn't mention, but I will. That is the retirement changes in terms of reforms, change of regimes, in retirement. The combination of the three of these components make it interesting to study the evolution of wealth inequality in the long run, and in particular with the role of intergenerational transfers. Now, the key sentence here is the second bullet point that you can see here. So identify with the paper, we want to identify what the pattern in long-term inequality would be if accumulation and transmission behaviors and policies not significantly change. And so in order to do that, we use a micro simulation model that are models that are suitable for this aim, since you can control in a simplified way for mechanisms that create the accumulation or then can drive the demography of a country. We are going to do that with a model that runs on Italian data, and the Italian economy is peculiar on this topic for three reasons that I'm gonna list to you. The one is the fact that the population, the expectation on demography are particularly negative or interesting. If you see the one that I was mentioning to you, the population is expected to fall to 47 billions from now is about 58 billions. In 2070, this is a very pessimistic prediction from ISTA, that is the National Institute of the National Institute. There are other predictions that are more optimistic or less pessimistic, but still we have an issue, and also in terms of aging. Then we have a high income to wealth to income ratio, and third point is that we are going with a long transition from a pension regime to another one. From a DB pension regime to a notional pension regime that, I mean, it's gonna create some generational gap and between cohorts that we're gonna see later and what we're gonna imply. The literature on this respect is vast, I mean, and comprehensive. If you're talking about the relationship between inheritances and gifts and inequality, especially in the last years, a lot of papers have come out. I would quote, for sure, the first one, that is the paper by Acciari Morelli, that is on Italian data, using administrative data on Italy on inheritance and gifts. This is not about the relationship between the two things that I was mentioning, but it's very interesting, and probably without this paper, we would not have studied this topic. Then there are, I mean, these papers like this one by Adamum, others, which they are interesting because they try to capture the impact of inheritances in explaining the intergenerational wealth mobility. This is another very important component. Moreover, there are the papers like that use this very helpful Scandinavian data, like the one by Black and Nicole and Sam. In particular, I want to mention this last one by Nicole and Sam, in which they do very, very interesting work, merging together both very well done empirical analysis with a theoretical analysis, in which they suggest that the relationship between intergenerational transfers and inequality is amplified in countries in which there is a low intergenerational mobility, in which there is a high level of inequality in inheritances, and in which there is a high level of inequality in wealth before receiving inheritances. And on this respect, Italy again may be an interesting case, because the level of intergenerational mobility is low, and also the inequality, wealth inequality is particularly high. I would mention also other papers that again try to capture the short-term effect of inheritances on inequality. This one by Wolf and Gittelman on US data, and while Palomino and others work on European data. These papers, but also others, they reach different conclusions regarding this effect that may be equalizing, or so gifts in intergenerational transfers may be equalizing or unequalizing. And finally, there are, the topic is really broad, since there are other papers that can study the effect of taxes on intergenerational transfers, and in particular, there is all a brand of literature, a strand of literature that works on the tax planning and all the behavioral responses to taxes. Used to say that we are trying to insert in this literature by saying that. Given what I showed you before, so the tendencies, the overall tendencies and trends in demography, in wealth accumulation, and in retirement regimes, it will be helpful to study what's going to be this relationship between intergenerational transfers and inequality in the long run. In a long run perspective. Finally, just one other reference to another paper that I want to share with you. It's a paper and a project more generally by Krenek and other co-authors at GRC and the European Commission, in which they adopt a static microsimulation model called INPACS mod over 5 European countries, in order to model the wealth transfers and the associated inheritance tax revenues until 2050. And they obtain very interesting results, since they projected inheritance tax revenues in Germany and France will double by 2040, while in Italy will double 2050, while in Italy will double by 2040. They raise a point, and the study, we can consider the study as perfectly complementary to ours, since we have developed a model that looks also at the distributional role of intergenerational transfers, both on wealth and also in terms of studying the role of taxes. And so I can now finally move to the our model. For those of you that are not familiar with this topic, I will briefly go over what are microsimulation models that have been in the class. They belong to the class of microeconometric models, and they've been used especially, basically for evaluating public policies. Starting from a certain baseline data set that may be done from by a survey or administrative data. There is this broad distinction between static and dynamic microsimulation models, in which the static ones, among which the most famous is the Euromod one, look at the short-term effect of reforms or taxes, or in particular tax reforms, while the dynamic one look at the medium and long-term evolution of the economies. It's interesting for me at least, to understand the relationship between these models, macrosimulation models, and other more complex macroeconomic models like the agent-based model. Here, I quote a paper by Professor Farmer, in which he explained what are the agent-based model, and also it's the relationship that may be with microsimulation models. But I'm open here also to listen to your opinions, and also later, I mean, what do you think about and how it's possible to improve these the microsimulation models, or try to interact the two, or whatever. So regarding our model, the same is TDIM, that stands for the Trifluid Dynamic Microsimulation Model. It is held by, as I was saying, the Italian Ministry of Economics and Finance. We have worked on the last version of the TDIM model. That is the third one. I was involved in this project in this stage, in which in this third phase there have been some major improvements, both in terms of data. We will see later. We have added some relevant piece of data, or piece of administrative data, and also in terms of modules, since, as you can see, we have developed a tax and benefit module, a wealth module that we're going to discuss in detail later, and a migration submodule. Now, these are very general features of our dynamic microsimulation model. As I was saying, it focuses on medium and long-term simulations. The time is discrete. So in particular, it is the year. There is a sequential structure of processes and modules in particular. Then the socioeconomic events are simulated according to conditional transition probabilities that are estimated externally through regressions jointly with the Monte Carlo simulation techniques. And I mean, jointly with this part, there is the alignment processes that work both on the demographic and macroeconomic assumptions. We will see later an example. And Liam 2.0 is the platform on which the model works. Here is just a slide to show you a comparison between this model and other Italian microsimulation models, dynamic simulation models. The important thing here is this one regarding the focus that have been in the past on pensions, social protection adequacy, and their related distribution of something I don't know. So I mean, just to say that the focus in the past phases of the project have been on pensions, basically. Now we're trying to, since we have added new modules, we have tried to move forward and innovate somehow. As I was saying, the model has some peculiarities, because he tried to take together a lot of information from, or a contribution from other models, and I mean, I will not list this for not getting into too much technicalities, and I will try to convince you of the strengths of this model, that are the comprehensiveness, since as we will see later, we try to include both demographic, labor, pension, wealth information, and simulate them in the long run. And also in terms of also the tax and benefit module is very important, because we simulate a lot of Italian policies. And finally, there is, as I was saying, the use of highly detailed administrative data. Regarding the limits, unfortunately, they are covered here by the slide. There is a limited behavioral responses to changing incentive and policy. So I mean, the behavioral responses in this kind of models in general are limited. especially with respect to other models that I was mentioning before. And also there is no business cycle or growth, or trends in growth or degrowth of the economy. Everything is steady. I mean, it's like if you assume that there is a steady state in the economy. We will see later an example of what are the alignments in terms of economic growth and question?
Yes. So you are studying wealth distribution without considering any growth.
Yeah, there is a growth, but it's steady. I mean, we'll see. Sure, we can. We're gonna skip a little bit of time. I'm gonna be back.
Study growth.
Yeah, it's about 1.4, 1.3. Sorry to go back.
No recession, only growth.
Yeah, but everything is steady. Also, the inflation is stable at 2%. I mean, also because it is a kind of also institutional. Yeah, kind of. Because this is a baseline scenario. You know, you have to, as we were saying, this is an institutional model, so you cannot kind of move too much away. It's from 2016 to 2070. This is the simulation period. So going back to the data, we built this data set that is called AdiSilk. It's based on a linkage between survey data, so from the Italian wave of Silk, that probably you know, and administrative data from INPS, that is the Italian Social Security Institute, from which we can obtain information on working careers and pensions of the individuals. So it is a direct link with fiscal codes. And then, I mean, we also added other, this AdiSilk dataset was useful not only to estimate transition probabilities, but also to use it as a starting sample to initiate the simulation. Then, specifically on the wealth data, we try to gather the information from different sources, because, as you know, wealth data are not so easy to grab and to build. I mean, a very good distribution of wealth. Luckily, on real wealth, that for us is only housing wealth, we take information from again administrative archives. And in the end, the result was that we obtained better fit of our totals, weighted totals, with respect to national accounts. I mean, in comparison with using SHIV, that is the Italian survey on household income and wealth, held by the Bank of Italy. It is kind of the reference, the Italian reference in terms of wealth. But it's still a survey. In particular, you can see the differences by looking at the number of second houses that from administrative data, a certain number of second houses and third and fourth houses arise with respect to survey data. This is something absolutely expected. The other component of wealth is instead financial wealth, from which we are not able to get data from the ministry, unfortunately, and so we had to think of an alternative strategy. The idea was to use data from SHIV, that is, as I said, the survey from the Bank of Italy. But I mean, as probably you know, these kind of surveys on wealth suffer of the problem of underreporting. So we adopted a procedure for correction of the underreporting in the first instance. That, I mean, helped us to get to the point of reaching this almost 80% of the national account total. And then as a second step, we did this statistical matching between SHIV and SILK, in which, of course, SILK is the recipient and SHIV is the donor of the information. So in the end, we end up with a distribution of net wealth in which liabilities and financial wealth come from statistical matching on survey data, Italian survey data, while house wealth comes from administrative. This is just to wrap up, to summarize. These are the totals in our baseline 2015. And these are the ratio with respect to national accounts. You see that in terms of net wealth, we perform pretty well. The problems are more in liabilities, especially, and financial wealth. But 80% is a good result if you think that if you use directly the survey from Bank of Italy, it would be like 30%. Or 35%, because there is a lot of underreporting in service in financial wealth. So these are other kind of information regarding the starting sample for the model. We did a sample weight calibration, and also there was an expansion of the starting sample in order to get 100,000 households that corresponds to this number of individuals that are 240,000 more or less. We are getting to the point that I was showing you before. These are the macro data and the alignments, and these are the different sources that we adopted to align the different process of the model. I will not go into detail, otherwise we will spend a lot of time here. But we try to, as I was saying, the model is institutional, so we try to stick on Eurostat aging report, and also the Department of Finance, that again is a part of the ministry, and other major institutions in Italy. And this is a slide that I was already showing you before regarding the long run alignments of the model. I can show you that, for instance, the GDP deflator, the inflation, both in terms of GDP deflator and CPI, as a 2% rate for after, again, I guess 2024, and also in terms of one of the things in which we are trying to work and improve is the returns on financial investments that are steady, and moreover they do not change across individuals, across households. So we are trying to in the future we want to try to introduce some variability across households, and also across quartiles, for instance. These are other things on which we are working. Finally, we end up with the model structure. These are the modules of the TD model. As I was saying, this is a sequential model. So we start from the demographic module, then labor market, pension, wealth, and tax and benefit, and then you start again the year, the next year. Here there are listed some of the processes and also choices that individuals may face year after year. For the demographic model, they can women may decide to give birth, or may decide, or the couples may decide to marry, and then there is the employment choice. Then there is and other in the retirement module. we have also included a form of behavioral response in terms of adding a possibility of retirement choice, so not introducing a deterministic entering in retirement, but letting them depend on an option value model. In wealth module, we're gonna see in a moment the details. As I was saying at the beginning, the wealth module is available only in rare cases in this kind of dynamic macro simulation models, because I mean the data, quality data on wealth are not so widespread. But I mean, we know that the modeling this component this component is very important in order to obtain a complete picture of an household well-being distribution, and also for our sake, that is to study the intergenerational links. The main assumptions that probably you have already understood them before are that net wealth is composed by these three components: real wealth, financial wealth, and liabilities. That house ownership is the only form of real wealth. That the financial wealth is has only, again, four types of activities: liquidity, government bonds, corporate bonds, and stocks. And mortgages are the only form of liabilities. The transition probabilities regarding the wealth module are computed using Shiv data, so the Banco of Italy data. This is the structure of the wealth module in itself. That of course is made by some other processes. The module starts with private wealth transfers, so intergenerational transfers that may be inheritances and gifts. So you can receive money from inheritances and gifts. Then there is the update of wealth, of net wealth, that comes from that is made by capital gains, and in both forms of capital and income gains. It means so to the increase of wealth depending on the rate of return. Then there are the processes that regard house ownership, that you can buy or sell your house, your first and other house, and that of course implies also the financing if you want to buy a house, that will employ the financial wealth of an household, and if until a certain level, and if otherwise there is a mortgage that is rising. Then there is the financial investment decision that every year also it may change. But the level of the financial wealth is may be directed towards one of the four different activities, and is estimated through it is estimated through a dynamic regression. So it takes into account the steadiness of these kind of choices. And finally, there is the household consumption rule. Here there is another arrow that points to saving rate or something like that. We have tried to estimate our best consumption function using Italian cheap data. But still, we obtained some results that were a little bit far from the Italian saving rate provided by national agencies, and so we have decided to align the average level to the national averages in order to obtain a reliable saving rate. these are the returns that I was mentioning, split by income and capital gain, and you already saw the sum of the values of these projections. Basically, I mean, they come from Standard & Poor's historical data in terms of when I refer to corporate bonds and stocks. These are the list. This is the list of regression. So for processes, for different processes, we have also more than one regression. And finally, we get to the final part of the presentation. It is about the understanding the role of intergenerational transfers. The process of wealth accumulation in the model is summarized and simplified in this way. So the variation of wealth, it may depend on the level of savings, on the accumulation that is based on the rate of returns, and finally on intergenerational transfers. And so in this paper, we focus on this channel. In the model, we model the intergenerational transfers in a complicated way. I mean, we devote a specific attention on these processes. As I was saying, these are divided between inheritances and gifts. You know that inheritances is driven by demography. So when it comes to the donors, they are the deceased individuals. When it comes to the receivers, it is a little bit more complicated, since there are some receivers that are selected deterministically, since they are the offsprings of deceased individuals. If they are in they are in the sample, already in the sample. Otherwise, we attribute a probability of receiving an inheritance. So we end up with these results. You can see here that, I mean, at the beginning of the simulation, almost all the successors or the heirs were simulated in probability, while at the end this percentage I mean decreased to 14%, and this, I mean, is absolutely preventable, because in the end of the simulation there are more of the offspring in sample offspring whose parents unfortunately die. And finally, the inter vivos or gifts transfers are instead are simulated probabilistically both on donors and recipient side. As you know, also in Italy we have the inheritance tax or transfer tax. I mean, depends on the way it is developed in each country. The point is that, as I was showing you in one of the first figures, in Italy, the level of the incidence of this tax is very, very low. The taxes, the exception area is set equal to 1 million euros. And then from that on, the tax rate is flat and equal to 4%. So, I mean, it's very unequal, and also it bites really on a small percentage of individuals. And the same rule applies also to gifts. Then to give you an idea of what are going to be the results regarding inheritances and gifts, we see that the percentage of households that in all our simulation receive an inheritance is almost 30%, while the percentage of households that receive a gift is way higher, and it is almost 70%. Of course, the the gifts are way lower in levels in absolute terms with respect to inheritances. The last point is of this slide is very important, since we want to underline that the model at the moment does not incorporate any behavioral response, direct to inheritances, but there is a kind of response when you go to estimate the consumption function, meaning that as we saw before, the consumption choice occurs after the generational transfer. So, for instance, if I receive an inheritance of a certain amount, in the consumption function, we control for the level of financial wealth. So my consumption choice will change depending on the level of financial wealth, that of course is influenced by the generational transfer level.
You don't consider. Do you put the inheritance in your consumption function?
No, but as I was saying, we include the financial wealth. So we are not. Yeah, we can. So
they make the decision before receiving, before the intergenerational transfer, so that they make a decision of consumption.
No, after. At the end, the consumption decision is the last one of the wealth module. So you receive the transfer at the beginning.
Because it's for your allocation,
Yeah.
But why you omit this?
This is something that we are working on. Because there is not a direct answer to this. We didn't thought about including a direct response within the consumption function on inheritances, but we stayed on a more general definition of financial wealth, because financial wealth may be also influenced by other processes in the module. Otherwise, we could have, been facing the problem of inserting in the consumption function too many things. So inheritance also, but also I don't know if you have bought a house or not during that year. Does it change the level of what you consume during that year? Probably yes. But we thought about inserting only the level of financial wealth. Now, yes.
So you think there's no consumption smoothing of the life cycle? People don't expect that they're going to inherit.
No, and this is the other very important topic. We need to improve our estimation of our consumption function also in this respect by including our life cycle, because this is a kind of Keynesian consumption function. So you decide what it's a percentage of the income, and that's all. So we in the future we want to try to include also these other components that make it more real and.
If I expect to inherit something, maybe I will.
Yeah.
Save less.
Yeah, but you know that in these kind of models to estimate this life cycle forward-looking expectations is not so easy in terms of computational time. It's something that we need to work on that. Now I think that I have to rush. These are the validation of the model, meaning that we can confront the results of the first years. So from 2016 up to 2020, but probably we will add those 2021, 22 later. This is the distribution of PIT taxpayers by gross income groups, and we see that more or less the comparison is between the model and the that is the Department of Finance, so official statistics of Italy. I mean, more or less, the distributions are very similar. The significant differences are here on the zero earners. And I mean, also this is an issue in which we are trying to work and try to understand how to oversample on that area. And this is the validation regarding wealth in the first years. We see that the discrepancy that we saw, sorry, at the beginning in 2016 tends to decrease up to 2020, and I mean, more or less, these are expected results. And finally, we are getting to the last part of the presentation, that are the simulation results regarding, in particular, intergenerational transfers. But before, I will just give you some figures on, first of all, the role of this wealth module within this more general micro simulation model. How did I do it? By showing the weight of capital income over total household income in simulation period. And we see that we starting from these are the yellow bars, starting from about the 10% in the end of simulation, given I mean all the assumption that I tried to explain to you in the last hour, we arrived to almost 20%, because I guess again this is a positive growing economy without any crisis, etc. But still, here the message is that the wealth matters in terms of the distribution of income, and when you use macro simulation models without taking into account the role of capital incomes, you are missing something. We obtained the fact that the wealth inequality rises in the last part of the simulation. So we start from about 0.6, we end up to about 0.67. And here in the last, this point, it was very interesting. Sorry that you can see it. It's about the number, the demography changes. So number of components shrinks from 2.3 in 2016 to 1.8 in 2070, number of household components. And also these, the rise of small households implies the decrease in number of heirs or successors. Now I don't remember the exact figure, but yeah, I can do this. Sorry, from 1.9% to 0.9% in 2070. So this already may let you understand what are going to be the results in the end. These are the graphs that. In particular, this one may be connected with the first one that I showed you regarding historical data on Italy. So the relationship between intergenerational transfers and national income. We see that the trend that was increasing in our model keeps increasing, rising, and the same happens with the ratio over net wealth. So intergenerational transfer, according to the model, gain relevance. And finally, we get to the most important results that keep together what I just in order to take into account the role of intergenerational transfers of wealth inequality, we built a very simplified counterfactual study in which we compare the baseline scenario, baseline inequality scenario, wealth inequality scenario, with some counterfactuals. Which are these three counterfactuals? One in which there are no intergenerational transfers. We shut down this channel in our model. So in the end, we end up with a depletion of economic resources. The second one is the same as the first, but there is no depletion of resources because these resources are redistributed across all the other households with an endowment. Finally, the third one is a scenario with no transfer tax, I mean, according to the Italian legislation. And we see, sorry, but I will move this, otherwise we'll not understand anything. That, I mean, with respect to the red line, was the same as the one that I showed you before. The absence of international transfers implies a strong reduction in Gini index, more pronounced if there is also an endowment. And interestingly, here it would seem to you that there a line is missing, but there are two lines that one over the other. So it means that the transfer tax in Italy does not influence in any case the level of wealth inequality according to our model in our simulation period, because as I was saying, it regards only a few individuals. I kind of think I will skip this other short run effect to get to this other figure. Sorry, that is the composition of the Gini index of household net wealth variation. So we take the variation of net wealth each year. We take the Gini index of the variation, and we end up with this kind of graph, in which we have all the sources of variation in terms of net wealth. And we see that the IGTs have a positive influence. So I mean, negative influence on. I mean, as a positive influence on the level of inequality after a certain time in the simulation, as opposed to other forces that drives inequality on the other side, like for instance house wealth returns or the savings that have a redistributive role. So before concluding, I would play it safe by saying what are the caveats and the work in progress, and then I will conclude rapidly. So these are simulated data, not real data. So this is an exercise that is useful to study what-if scenarios, and I think that is what I did with the counterfactual examples. There are some work that we have to do on both on the modeling side and on the data side. On the data side, I'm referring to the correction of the upper tail. For instance, taken from Forbes rich list. Also, there is the issue of the uncertainty, so we have to introduce confidence interval. In terms of modeling, going back to the point that you were raising, it's important to introduce better behavioral responses. Finally, to wrap up, we started from a rich data set in Italy, and we wanted to understand what is the role of intergenerational transfers in the long run using a dynamic microsimulation model. We obtained that there are three factors that may explain the surging role of intergenerational transfers in explaining this inequality, that are the steady and positive projections on the rate of returns, the reducing fertility rates, and household size that implies the reduction of success. Sorry. And the rise in the inequality of inheritances. That is something that I didn't show you, but it's really important, also related to what I was mentioning at the beginning of the paper by Nico and Sam. Another important point is, and with this one, related to the fact that the equalizing effect becomes significant and strong after more or less 2030 to 2035. That is, I mean, the moment in time when in Italy people that belong to these so-called boomers, baby boomers, generation will start to die. And this is one of the explanations that of this late increase of this strong effect. So the policy implication is something that is in line with the paper that I was mentioning by Krenek of the JRC. It's going to probably be time to reconsider the policy and tax framework regarding IGTs, so intergenerational transfers, toward a more egalitarian direction. And Italy, I think, is a good example because of the structure of inheritance tax that we have at the moment. And I think that yeah, I mean, other further developments that may be are just to try to build a more complex concept of wealth that take into account both private and public wealth. That again, in the Italian case, may be of particular interest. And really, I will stop. Thank you very much for your attention. To ask and
showing the scenario, different scenarios you
yeah.
They might want. No intergenerational transfer of you.
This is the scenario in which I shut down this channel. So it's like if you don't receive the
But what do you do with that?
depletion of resources.
Okay, so you distribute it.
No.
So you just cut it.
Yeah.
But yes, is it realistic?
No, I mean, these are not realistic scenarios, but it is exactly something that you can do with this tool, with this.
What would be the policy equivalent of this? So you suppose you want to implement a policy and compare different scenarios, policy scenarios. So what would be comparable to no IG?
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're about. This graph should not be taken from a policy implication or policy scenario point of view. This is something only to get the role of intergenerational transfers on in a point. Then, I mean, I will probably miss a slide because probably I need to add another slide in the future in which I can, for instance, I can simulate the UK tax applied on the Italian data and see what will happen. So as we saw, the UK tax is or the French one, yeah. This is something that I already thought about it. In the future, where we will add this component, because otherwise, of course, this does not make sense in terms of other, because the green line is means a transfer tax of 100%. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know if this. Okay, sure. How should I do?
Ask him to ask you.
Okay, Joe, if you want, you can talk. Okay.
Hey, Michele, thanks very much. So my understanding is that a lot of the motivation for this question is coming from rising wealth to income ratios, and I think the lion's share of that is coming from housing prices going up, like a sort of stylized fact there, I think, of that phenomenon. So maybe like it's worth drilling in a bit more to like what's going on with housing in that model. Like one question I had, like a clarifying question really, was when you're talking about can't quite remember the phrase, but like housing returns, like is that just like the rent and imputed rent, or is that also the like asset price? I think you mentioned it was like income but not capital gains or something like that. So Yeah, just and you know, how is does that feed into the consumption module? And yeah, just like trying to understand, to me, like that's sort of the key thing that's been happening to wealth, and trying to just understand how that fits into that sort of that model.
Yeah, should I reply? Thanks, Joe, for your question. It's pretty helpful, and I think that it's helpful also because in the future I will probably we will probably present some of the results also divided by the source of change in inequality by dividing by housing wealth, financial wealth, and also liabilities. In terms of what you were saying, first of all, I want to say that buying and selling of houses are aligned. So the number, both in numbers and in totals. So there is no creation of new houses, boom in buildings or whatever. So this is for the buying the market, the housing market. And secondly, there are both a component, of course, of capital and income gains in terms of housing wealth. So the capital gain is kept really low. Sorry, I don't recall at the moment the level. It should be probably equal to the GDP growth that is in the model very low, but still it is. I mean, of course, there is a growth. While the income gain is equal to the rent. I mean, you imagine that who has a second house may get an income gain that comes from the rent.
I guess maybe then there's like if you're keeping the house price inflation at the rate of GDP, then there's somehow an inconsistency with the motivation that you provided at the start, in that if much of the increase in the wealth to income ratio is coming from the very fact that house prices have increased faster than GDP. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I agree. The problem is that it's hard when you go to these long-term projections then to decide to get
you'll be a rich man if you can guess.
The inflation rate is constant, asset prices should be related of inflation or interest rates. So how do you model the asset price in general? So it can be also financial assets. So every asset changes prices as well. Both financial assets and
but as you saw,
model somehow
the change, the asset price is not. I mean, are always stable after.
So you make a hypothesis of perfect world.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree completely with you, Joe. Thanks for your suggestions. So we will go deeper on this discrepancy that you mentioned. Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah, there are. Yeah.
I mean, my question was kind of, what's the feedback from the micro to macro and from the macro to micro? So in a way, Joe's question, putting his finger on the housing market, is exactly the most important specific part of my question, which is maybe more general. Can you say more generally? So the macro scenarios are completely exogenous. They are not determined at all by the endogenous dynamics of wealth that you simulate. Is that right?
You're referring to wealth or to overall the overall
GDP
model
growth, and all these are completely exogenous. They're just completely given.
Yeah.
So they don't depend on what's happening. So demography can change wealth, and you could say wealth is changing GDP because you have a theory about how people decide to invest when they get rich or something like that. So there's nothing from micro to macro, and then from macro to micro, you have what are all the mechanisms what's the consequences of your GDP and macro scenarios on the micro? You mentioned a few, like, but there are quite a few.
I mean, yeah, the links between micro and macro are, I think that are more than one. For instance, there is also the assumption of in the labor market that the wages are follow the growth of labor productivity in the moment, at the moment. This was the simplifying assumption. And of course, it would have been really long and boring to explain you all the assumptions that are here. But I agree. I mean, I get your point. But still, all the I mean, the main assumption are all aligned to to external sources that, of course, I mean, like Abuji or Eurostat projections, and of course they come from other models in which they predict based on other sources, and but still there is coherence in terms of this. So then, of course, we could go also. I mean, we could discuss and go deeper in understanding which kind of link there is between wealth and debt on. But
from macro to just to get the background, from macro to micro, it's the asset prices, something for asset prices, and then something on labor income through labor productivity. And what else? Those are the main two things.
Yeah, I guess these are the main two. And also, I mean, the absence of the labor demand is not there. I mean, you assume that the employment level depends on on alignment. So there is no production function. There is nobody that says, okay, I will produce this or that.
Another thing is like the period is quite long, right? 50 years. So
Yeah.
it's not nothing. So you can, especially we are passing through, going through difficult times now. So we had multiple crises like COVID plant crisis. So is it really realistic to consider a constant inflation rate over next years?
Yeah, of course, we are working to introduce in the model these last
usually some adverse scenarios. Like if you want to consider such a long period, so otherwise the model quite convenient for shorter periods, but I guess we cannot measure wealth transfer effects or demographic things through over short periods. So
yeah, we are still showing. Sorry, we are getting out of everything. I guess we're still showing synthetic indicators. So these are not absolute values of wealth, of course, that I do not rely on absolutely. These are synthetic indicators of inequality that are probably less influenced by what you were suggesting. That are probably the only instrument that may be adopted and studied with these models. Of course, I cannot say the level of the average level of wealth in 2070 will be 30 millions of pounds, because I don't know. I mean, there's not sense. But probably I can see something on the distribution on.
yes, so you're interested in is the distribution of the aggregate level.
The distribution, not the aggregate level.
Okay.
Yeah, I need to stop, I think. If you probably have a question, no, but yeah, or later I am available. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
To here and to the one online. Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you very much. That's all. Thank you.
Sorry for the
No,
delay.
no, that's okay. Thank you.
No, I don't know.